Welcome United. So we have a great episode for you today. I'm here from the Hattle Hall, Assembly Hall, to give you a sneak preview of some of the highlights and the great things coming this episode. Enjoy.
People will sometimes say, oh, I just got angry. The switch flipped. It's not a switch. It's a dial. The secret to anger that no one wants to talk about is that it feels good. And the reason why anger feels good is because it's an emotion of action. At the end of the day, sports and competition are about dominance, and anger can absolutely help that.
If you don't embrace anger, you're putting a cap on yourself because you're scared to unlock that dominant part of yourself.
When people are comfortable with that anger, it allows them to be freer with their aggressiveness, and that aggressiveness leads to dominance. We want dominance. Why can we not say that out loud?
I've had teammates, people who are these like sweet cupcakes, just the kindest person. And then I step onto the court and I'm like, thank God I'm on your team. Because if you were looking at me across the net like that, I'd want to pee my pants.
I had a lot of times in my life where people told me, you suck, you're not good enough. And the response is an angry, oh yeah? Fuck you, watch me. I don't think that there's a single self-talk mantra that's gotten more things done than fuck you, watch me. And that's about harnessing our anger.
Things that I'm taking away from today is we're all fucking angry, and it's better to use it and mobilize it instead of ignoring it and letting it suppress us. So the answer was, fuck you, watch me.
Yep.
Hi everyone, welcome to United. My name is Madeline Koch. I'm a PhD student at Indiana University studying sports and performance psychology, and today I'm joined by Dr. Mitch Abrams. So thank you for joining us and welcome to United, Mitch.
Thank you for having me, Madeline, and I look forward to the conversation.
So in honor of the historic and undefeated Indiana Hoosier football team, we bring our guests onto the episode in a pretty specific way. So I'm going to give a shout out to Coach Signetti.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I win. Google me.
So, if we Googled you, Dr. Mitch Abrams, what would our search come up with?
Oh, very mixed reviews. I'm a sports psychologist who's been working in the field of anger management and violence for pushing 30 years now. And working in that space, you often get a very mixed group of people that come to you. Anger is, as far as I'm concerned, the emotion that people are most in denial and most ashamed of. And so the people that get referred for anger management usually think that they're being sent to the principal's office. And so, not surprisingly, when you work with that population, and including some of those folks that are very volatile, sometimes very antisocial, sometimes not caring so much about the consequences of their action. So if you Googled me and you found reviews from people that weren't happy, it's usually because we were in dark places. Interestingly enough, I think the other side of it, though, is that people don't want to acknowledge that they struggle with anger. So even when they do well, they're very rare to say, hey, I saw Abrams and everything was great. But I think that I've made a mark on the field, primarily because not enough people are talking about this stuff. So between being a forensic psychologist working in sports psych, being a chief psychologist in the prison system for over the last 25 years, working in anger and trauma, I have a bit of a mixed reputation, but even worse, I'm from Brooklyn, right? So, you know, whenever I talk, people hear it come through. So sometimes I can be a little bit too colloquial. So if I hurt anybody's eardrums, I apologize in advance.
I kind of want to ask, what's the most Brooklyn thing about you? Is it the way you talk?
No, it's the way I size people up.
You size people up.
Yes. In Brooklyn, when you are in some hairy environments, it's not the person in front of you that you have to worry about. It's the people around them. And so how I mean, also, I think that working in prison certainly hones the skill more. But I think the easy thing is, oh, you know, he likes pizza and he's got this accent and this and this and this. But the truth is that I think the most Brooklyn thing about me is how I navigate space.
I mean, anger is your topic, so how other people react, and even if someone's angry, you don't know how they're going to deal with it, so trying to predict it before it comes.
Indeed.
You are the expert on anger management in sport. You said you have a lot of experience over years and also in different environments, whether it's sports or correctional facilities. What was it about anger that drew you to the topic? Or was there a moment when you were going throughout your career where you realized, wow, no one's talking about this, and if we continue to not talk about it, like, we're kind of screwed?
Way before I was in the field, I was a very angry kid. We tend to study what we struggle with. I was a very poor kid in a very poor neighborhood, and that fucking sucks. It really sucks. And what made it worse and better was I had amazing parents. And so when you know that you're in poverty and it's your parents' fault, but you also are blessed to have really attentive and supportive and reassuring parents, you really can't take it out on them so much. So I struggled for a while, and there were a couple of forks in the road that things could have gotten hairy. And I remember one time my mother said, you better fix that or you're going to ruin your life. And I was probably about 13 at the time, and she was right. And so I didn't realize that was going to be a path towards anger management. I recognized there were a lot of athletes I played with that were crazy talented and never got anywhere because they were more interested in being hotheads, and then were labeled uncoachable. I also bounced in clubs in New York City when I was going through undergrad. That taught me a lot about staying cool and how anger interferes with your ability to think clearly. Certainly alcohol doesn't help much either. But it wasn't until I was getting ready to go to graduate school, Eva Feinler, who was one of the top child and adolescent anger management folks in the country, was my mentor at CW Post, Long Island University. And I said, look, I want to take your program and apply it to athletes. And when I first thought about that, I was very sensitive to the fact that I knew a lot of athletes acted like assholes. And I wanted to stop that. And a lot of coaches had no interest in that because they didn't understand it. And honestly, I didn't package it really well. I didn't really appreciate how much anger can be facilitative if you learn how to harness it. And so part of it was I was basically walking in telling coaches, your athletes are all a bunch of idiots, and we need to stop letting them act that way. Even though I knew that athletes are not more angry or more violent than non-athletes on average. But Eva said, well, that's great, but you need to find a sports psychologist. And I was like, this is like the mid-90s. What the hell's a sports psychologist? So she says, I want you to go find Shane Murphy. He's going to be at a local conference. I didn't know who Shane was. She told me he was the first full-time sports psychologist for the United States Olympic Committee, and he was going to be presenting at a conference. I was like, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of people there. How am I going to find this guy? And she was like, you're from Brooklyn. Go find him. Well, he sits down right next to me. Just dumb luck. He sits down right next to me, and he's a Mets fan, just like me. And I tell him what I want to do, and he says, great, let's do it. And that started my mentorship. So, if you go from 13-year-old Mitch, who was, doing very well in school, being a pretty good athlete, but a little bit of a hothead under the surface, to, oh, you're going to wind up being the anger management expert in sports, I would have never tracked it. But I don't think there's any denying that my expertise very much matches my personality. I'm better at it than I used to be, for sure.
I believe you. I didn't know you then, but I believe you.
Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like sports is not a place that is immune to anger, a place that is immune to like the moral code. And you really wanted to bring it in there. But there potentially could have been like pushback from coaches, like we don't talk about that here. Or, yeah, I don't want that athlete because they could be more reactive or aggressive. When people think of anger management, they probably know like, oh yeah, that's for angry people. It's for aggressive people. That's not for me. I'm not angry.
Right.
Like that's not for my kids. They're not angry. So what are we missing out on?
Well, but Madeline, are you aggressive? You bet your ass you are.
Ways, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You bet your ass you are. And this is not, audience, so I mean this fondly. I'm not trying to insult her, right? The thing is that I think that most people didn't even get the definitions right. And if you don't have the language right, everything else falls apart. So people, even in sports psychology, used to think, oh, well, being aggressive means that you want to hurt someone. No, not necessarily. Being aggressive has to do with the tenacity with which you go after your goals. There are no athletes that I've met, for that matter, no successful people that I've met that have not been aggressive, right? But we've conflated the two. So don't be angry, don't be aggressive. No, nonsense. In fact, I think one of the interesting things about sports is that it is completely overt that you need to be aggressive in order to be successful. Because the opposite of aggressive is passive. You know, it's like if you're a volleyball player, are you just going to let the ball get spiked into your face, or you're going to go up and try to block it, right? In soccer, you don't say, excuse me, Ms. Goalie, can you move out of the way? No, you're aggressively going after your goals. Now, the interesting thing about it is anger is also something that's inconsistently encouraged in sport. You know, most coaches want their athletes up to that line without going over it. But no one teaches the athletes how to cool themselves down. Right? So you have coaches that are yelling and spits flying everywhere and bulging veins, right? And then they expect their athletes to be well behaved. Or the defensive lineman who you want the guy to kill the quarterback, but he's so amped up he jumps off sides, right? And then you sit his butt on the bench. And so the thing is I think too many coaches have, and parents too, have given very mixed messages about emotions to begin with, and anger specifically. Anger is your friend. It is absolutely something to harness. I don't know about you, but certainly for me, I had a lot of times in my life where people told me, you suck, you're not good enough. And the response to that is an angry, oh yeah, fuck you, watch me. I don't think that there's a single self-talk mantra that's gotten more things done than fuck you, watch me. And that's about harnessing our anger. Right? And so why can't we just be honest about it and use it, even if sports make it very confusing at times because we get mixed messages?
I'm so happy that you brought that mantra up. My interests lie in the transfer portal. And so something that I found when I was talking with athletes about like what made you want to transfer, what motivated you. And a lot of it was being reminded of, well, this is your role on the team. I don't see you having potential to change it. Or you aren't equipped to play in this conference. So the answer was, fuck you, watch me. I'm going to go play in the Big Ten. I'm going to prove you wrong in every way. So that rebrand of anger as a motivator and something that can actually sustain you.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I'm so glad we're talking about this because I think that the transfer portal has a lot of problems. But there's actually a couple of good wrinkles in there. You know, everyone thinks that the transfer portal is completely built off of selfish NIL athletes who just want to get the most exposure possible. And there is some of that. Every good thing has some bad things too. But the good thing about the transfer portal, at least the intention of it, is you're not stuck where you go. There's always been outs inside transfer portal for head coach changes, right? And so you're not stuck where you go. And if you feel that you can have a better opportunity elsewhere, you shouldn't be wedded to that. And one could take it both ways. What would happen, Madeline, if there was no transfer portal, right? I'll give you an example. I had an athlete I was working with, defensive end, who had thoracic outlet syndrome surgery. He had to have a partial piece of his rib removed. And he comes back, and this kid is a beast. I mean, he's like 6'5", 280, like shredded. And he's like, Doc, I can't wait to get out there. I said, all right, well, we'll see what happens once you start hitting the practice field. And he comes back after the first practice session. He goes, not only do I not have my spot, I'm fourth on the depth chart now. I said, how do you feel about that? He goes, I'm really sad. I'm really disappointed. I thought that the coaches had my back. I said, okay, where's the anger? He goes, huh? I was like, where's the anger? You're not pissed off about that? He goes, yeah, but if I take that on the practice field, I'm going to hurt one of my teammates. How bad do you want your position back? He said, pretty bad. I said, well, then you give the coaches absolutely no choice but to put you back where you belong. You don't go to try to hurt your teammates, but you go out there and practice every rep like it doesn't matter if it's the first preseason rep or if it's the Super Bowl or the NCAA champion. I don't care what it is. You play through your opponent and let the chips fall where they may. And sure enough, he got back his spot. And he was like, I can't believe that worked. I said, because you were afraid to be angry, even though you were completely justified to do so, to be angry, and you didn't have the confidence in your ability to harness it. You were afraid you'd get out of control. Now, this is a kid. I mean, his parents were unbelievable. This kid's moral code is far better than mine. There's some athletes who you work with and you're like, you know something? You can hit the gas. I'm not worried about you doing bad things. And then there's others that you're like, I might want to reel that in a little bit. But this kid absolutely harnessed it and got where he wanted to be.
That's so cool to see the switch from sadness, which kind of made him, I don't know, stationary, to anger as a mobilizer. It led to action. It led to a new pursuit, a change in behavior, mentality, resilience, all the things. And also what stuck out to me was how it was mislabeled almost at the beginning.
You are 1,000,000,000% right. The secret to anger that no one wants to talk about is that it feels good. And the reason why anger feels good is because it's an emotion of action. Sadness, even anxiety. I mean, look, anxiety and anger are physiologically nearly identical. The difference is one's running away and one's running towards. And when you run away when you're anxious, then you get rewarded for running away because there's no danger. So you keep running away, but you're further and further away from your goals. So anger is about, I mean, we know with depression, behavioral activation is monstrously effective in helping people, right? So now you're not, and when we're dealing with the treatment of trauma, I always ask people, aren't you tired of running away from the problem? You turn and you face your demons. It turns out they're a lot easier to face than you realize. And so anger is an emotion of action. It doesn't mean there's no risks. I was talking to someone about this last week. I see anger like social media and guns, for that matter. But all three of them can be dangerous if you don't know how to handle them responsibly. But if you do know how to handle them responsibly, they could be remarkably effective at helping you getting your goals met.
Absolutely, yeah. I like how you talked about it too with it's an approach behavior instead of anxiety as the avoidance, because you're more likely to find the things that you're thinking about. You are what you consume. So if you're thinking about what's next, you can find it.
Absolutely.
Something else you talked about, which I was hoping to bring up, is sports that are more like maybe not violence, but aggression is demanded. It's not optional in a lot of sports, but some specifically like football, martial arts, boxing, karate, those sorts of things. Kids often get put in sport because like, oh, this kid has a lot of energy. Let's give him an outlet. Let's put him in sports. That way they can do it in a productive way and in a space that allows it. And what happens when we put people who have a not healthy or not well-adjusted relationship with anger in violent sports? Is that the best outlet?
It's a great question. But first, before we do that, let's be mindful that most sports are aggressive. In fact, I can't think of any sport that is never aggressive. There are some sports that have non-aggressive times. Like if you're playing baseball and you're playing the field, you're not aggressive. You're passively waiting for the ball to come your way and an opportunity to play. But it's absolutely, pitcher versus batter is absolutely an aggressive conquest, right? If you're putting in golf, that might not be the most aggressive. And not surprisingly, you could probably afford to have a little bit more anger when you're driving than when you're on the green, right? And so I would argue that aggressiveness is always there. It's never not there. It's just on a continuum. But then go to the question you were saying before about whether or not young athletes that might have some issues with anger, should they be involved in violent or striking sports? Well, one of the great things about martial arts, at least traditional martial arts, put a big premium on discipline. Discipline and honor are huge in martial arts. Now, MMA, maybe not, but when you have discipline with anger, now you're talking about harnessing it. And so this is kind of the take-home message. This is how I would see it. First off, what we're talking about is catharsis, right? We're talking about the ability to expel the energy that you have all bound up inside you. And this is not just the ADHD conduct disordered kid. This is the good student who has to, deal with a crazy schedule and parents that are going all different. Everybody deals with stress. And exercise and sports are a wonderful place for catharsis. What we have to be careful about, though, is that if we use certain types of exercises when we're angry, we will feel better and then we'll be more likely to do them again. For example, you'll hear sometimes people will say, oh, if you're angry, go hit the heavy bag. Well, what's going to happen is after you hit the heavy bag, you're going to feel better. Now, the next time you're angry, you don't have the heavy bag, but you have your girlfriend in front of you. That's a problem. And so what I say is that if you're using exercise to specifically cathartic anger, stay away from striking exercises. No punching, no kicking. That's for the world of weightlifting, running, swimming, Pilates, bar method. I don't care, any of those things. Stay away from striking exercises. But if you're just taking a look at the opportunity to let off steam that doesn't have to be anger driven, then by all means, because, but this is also the other secret that nobody wants to talk about. You might go and play football or basketball or whatever sport that you're all bound up with anger and everybody thinks it's great until you go over the line. And this is one of the things that really worries me. There's not enough honest conversation about teaching people how to, and it's I talk about this in my book, this concept of adjusting the flame. People will sometimes say, oh, I just got angry, the switch flipped. It's not a switch, it's a dial. I believe that very strongly, because if it's a switch, then we're screwed. Then it means when you get pissed, you're going to do bad shit. And that's just not true. We know about the Yerkes-Dodson law, the idea that performance increases up to a certain point, whereas arousal increases, then you get to a certain point that the cognitive functions start to go to crap. The key is, and there's individual differences for the person. There's also individual differences depending on the task at hand. The key is I want people right up to that red line without going over it. Well, how are they going to know how to do that unless they have an early detection system so they can recognize when they're getting too hot, and B, a toolbox that helps them just turn it down a little bit. I'm not asking you to do downward dog at the free throw line, right? I'm asking just to take, if you're at an 11 right now, bring it down to 8 or 9. And I even go further than that. I talk a lot about teams having a commitment to emotional intelligence, that we are going to play up to that red line, and anybody on this team that's over that line compromises the success of the team. So we have to be able to sub that person out if sport allows it, right? Soccer and basketball and volleyball, every sport has different rules about when you could substitute and when you can't. But if we have a team commitment that says, listen, I want everyone playing hot, but not so hot that you make mistakes. If any of us recognize that someone on our team is that hot, we need to get him out of the fire, because we don't want to lose her for the whole match. We don't want her to take a red card or do something stupid. We want her right up to there on fire, playing her game, but not starting to make mental mistakes. And that comes top down. When the coaches say this is how we want to do it, and the coach will manage it as well, meaning manage their own emotions well, now you start to have a culture of everyone's going to have a whole lot of fun. And this is one of the reasons why anger also feels so good. It's easier to dominate because it increases strength, speed, stamina, decreases your perception of pain. At moderate levels, anger can help you. So let's use that. Let's kick everyone's ass. Everyone's ass. You get up, we're kicking your ass too. And if we see that we're not able to do it, then we need to pull back. Because I think that there's a lot of athletes that, people talk about driven to success. I think a lot of athletes short arm their careers, that they don't play as well as they could because they're afraid of getting up to that red line. It's one way or the other. Either they're afraid of getting up to the red line, or they don't even know a red line exists and their whole career goes to crap because of bad behavior. Versus, this is knowable. Why are we not teaching athletes how to do this more consistently?
When I think about anger in the beginning, it was like, well, it starts with self-awareness. And because it is a taboo topic for some people, they don't openly have conversations about it. So it feels like it's something you have to do alone. It's this thing that you need to work on your anger and you need to monitor it. But then when you talk about the environment and the teammates and coaches and modeling, how it's not a solo fight and the open conversations around it really can save someone.
Absolutely. And we've said so many times when we see athletes that are dominant, I remember the first time I heard someone talking about Derrick Henry when he was on Alabama. They said, oh, he runs angry. That wasn't an insult, right? The first time I saw, Serena wound up being better than Venus, but the first time I saw Venus play, I was like, holy shit. No, I ain't even stepping on the court. She'll hit me right between the eyes. And that's the other thing. When people are comfortable with that anger, it allows them to be freer with their aggressiveness. And that aggressiveness leads to dominance. We want dominance. Why can we not say that out loud? Everyone wants to be demure and nice because we're trying to get endorsements from this company, and this company is going to be upset with us because of our social messaging. But at the end of the day, sports and competition are about dominance, and anger can absolutely help that.
It sounds like if you don't embrace anger, you're putting a cap on yourself. You're putting a ceiling because you're scared or hesitant to unlock that dominant part of yourself. People are coming to mind right now, examples of how people can harness it, because I've had teammates, people who are these like sweet cupcakes in real life, just the kindest person. And then I step onto the court and I'm like, thank God I'm on your team. Because if you were looking at me across the net like that, I'd want to pee my pants.
Yes.
But that's great examples of controlling the flame and someone who has great control of it, knowing when anger can be so productive and facilitative and give you that dominance, and recognizing there's times in life off the court where it's more harmful, but they can tap into it.
No doubt about it, Madeline. And I think that people don't give enough credit for the fact that most athletes already come pre-programmed with an anger management toolkit. Either because of good coaching when they were young, good parenting. There is some genetic component to emotional intelligence. But the truth of the matter is that why aren't more athletes getting in trouble all the time? Because it's like when I'm dealing with people in prison, right? They'll go, the guy gets into a fight with another guy and goes, Doc, it's not my fault. I was impulsive. I was like, well, if you were so impulsive, how come you're not punching me right now? And he's like, well, because I'd get in trouble. I say, okay, so the truth is, you can control your impulses, and sometimes it's more difficult than others. And that's the name of the game. It's just really that simple. And there's some people that are blessed with good genetics, good role models, good coaching, good trial and error, finding out early the right way to deal with being upset and not. But these are all teachable skills. Although I will add one thing, Madeline, that I don't think people appreciate enough, is even though I talk about early detection being so important, where it is really difficult for athletes is this. When we talk about early detection, we're talking about two primary things. The first is paying attention to how your physiology changes when your anger increases, right? The spike in the sympathetic nervous system, that's, increase in heart rate, breathing rate, muscle tension, sweating, all of these things. Well, the problem with that is all of those things happen naturally in the middle of competition. So if you use the physiology as the sign to when you think you're angry, then A, you're angry all the time when you play, and B, how do you know when to start using your skills? And so for athletes in competition, what I tell people to look for is look for a change in your cognitive set. If you are more interested in executing your opponent than executing the play, that's when you know you have a problem. That because you can't rely on your physiology. The other thing that we also try to teach people is knowing what your triggers are. I don't care the sport. If you are not prepared for trash talk, and you'll hear a lot of people say, "Oh, well, trash talk is immoral." Tough shit. It's there anyway. Well, it's like, whether you think
not
it's
going anywhere.
immoral or not, it's there, so you might as well learn how to deal with it. And what trash talk is going to be most successful? The ones that push your triggers. There's certain things, someone curses at you or punches you, those are easy. Most people are going to respond angrily to that. But, let's say someone is not comfortable with the way their body looks and someone makes fun of their body somehow. And all of a sudden they go from 0 to 60 and everyone else is like, all right, that was annoying, but what was that? Because it was a personal trigger for that person, right? Or someone said, actually, this happened at the Indiana-Miami game. At the end of the game, there was an Indiana player who was talking smack to a Miami player whose father recently passed away. And I don't know if the Indiana player knew it or not, but the Miami player absolutely overreacted. And once people heard that's what it was about, then they were like, oh, now I get it, right? Because intentionally or unintentionally, he pushed his trigger. The more we know our triggers, the more we can protect them and not react. What I often tell people with trash talk is as soon as someone starts trash talking, you should start smiling. And they're like, why? He's saying shit about my mother. He's doing that because he's worried he can't beat you physically. He's trying to beat you mentally. Once he tries to go to the mental game, it means you've already won the physical game. Stay cool.
Right. With that, I mean, the smiling after, I think of the quote, like, he who angers you conquers you, and giving away your dominance to something because maybe you knew it or you didn't know it, but that was a trigger for you. And also something I'm thinking about is we don't react. We react to anger, but more often we react to who's angry, how people portray it. Anger might be more socially acceptable for some identities compared to others. I think of sometimes anger is socialized as a masculine trait because it goes with masculine norms of dominance. It might be different for a woman, an athlete of color, to express anger because it might not be seen as assertive or competitive, but instead someone who's a diva or an angry Black woman, those sorts of things.
It's an excellent point. I think it's evolving now. Okay. First off, the research on testosterone and violence is mixed at best. Violence is multiply determined. And we really, I'm not saying testosterone has nothing to do with aggressiveness. There's some research that says yes, there's some research that says no. There's a lot of social constructs. The interesting thing is I'm not convinced that angry, violent women are because they have more testosterone, right? I think that sports provide an environment where aggressiveness is more not just condoned, but expected. When an athlete, male or female, acts aggressively, then the observer may start using all their own prejudices and tropes to assign meaning to it. Which is kind of funny because, not funny, I mean ironic, because there's a lot of good reasons that men should be more scared of women than women should be scared of men. It does, and it's in the context of domestic violence. There's no doubt anybody who becomes physically violent, there's no excuse for it, right? But most domestic violence is low level and bidirectional. It has to do with people saying things that really hit at the core of who you are. And if you think that women are not able to do that, you're not paying attention, right? Anybody hurting someone else is a problem. Relationships are complicated. I think that sports create an environment which is both good and bad. It allows for and expects this level of aggressiveness that all of a sudden they go, oh, a woman's being aggressive. I remember Chris Carr when he was at Ohio State. And anybody wants to do the research, you'll see how long ago that was. Very early in my career. Chris knew that I was writing with Shane Murphy about anger, and he and I were talking about something, and he says, isn't it funny that someone who's doing exactly what he's supposed to do in the middle of Columbus, Ohio, in a football stadium, if they did the same exact thing in the parking lot, it would be a felony, right? And so sports create an environment for people to be their most aggressive. And you said something else, Madeline, I want to attend to. People will sometimes talk about assertiveness. And do you know why they talk about assertiveness? Because the actual definition of assertiveness has nothing to do with sports. Assertiveness has to do with advocating for your rights. It's a communication style. Assertiveness training was designed for people with low self-esteem to help them learn how to communicate with people. Now, are there athletes that need to learn assertiveness training if they're going to talk to their coaches effectively in order to try to get what they want? Absolutely. But assertiveness, there are no rights to win in sport, right? You're not standing up for your rights. You have to be aggressive. But people will sometimes try to talk about assertiveness as if that is more socially acceptable. And over time, I think, and not just because of feminism, but certainly because of sports to a degree, has created an environment that it's not only acceptable for women to be aggressive, it's encouraged. And in some ways, that has helped the grand scheme of things. Because the truth is we need to be aggressive to be successful. But the idea that then people will use either racial or chauvinistic or this culture or that culture, that the ends justify the means, that I can say something slanderous about this person because of whatever their individual factors are. And the truth of the matter is, what you're allowed to do in sports is not the same as what you're allowed to do in a relationship. It's not the same as what you're allowed to do in society. One of the biggest problems I think athletes deal with these days is that no one gives them really good social media training. You do what you do, and you just dominated everyone so much, you just dropped 80, okay? People are going to be telling you how great you are. That doesn't all of a sudden make you a brilliant political strategist when you get on social media and everyone's going to then just go, you're the best, thank you for what you said. And so, and I'm not saying stick to basketball. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there are different rules in competition than outside of competition. And what I teach athletes that I'm working with from a social media point of view, it's the 5-minute yo mama rule. You're not allowed to respond to anything for 5 minutes, no matter what, because you need to give yourself a little bit of time to be distracted, for the anger to come down or whatever. And then whatever you think you're going to post, you imagine your mama looking at it. And if she would go, all right, that's fine, go ahead, then have at it. But if your mother would not say, yeah, I'm proud of you doing it, throw it in the trash. It's just not worth it.
That is such a great rule. It makes me, you talked about a couple things. One was that like the aggressiveness and the assertiveness does not just stay in the world of sport, but these are skills that translate into the real world. I want to give like my mom a shout out because when I was growing up, me and all my siblings, she's the sweetest person, a cupcake, just so kind. But she had two things she'd say to us: you need to be aggressive and have fun. And she'd always say that to us going into sports games. But now when I go to give a presentation or something, or my brother goes and takes a big exam, she said, well, be aggressive, but still have fun. So seeing how it's not just something, aggressiveness and assertiveness, anger, not just things that can facilitate your performance in sport, but in life as well. Professional pursuits, just ambition overall. And the other thing you talked on was social media. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what accountability is like with anger. Because with social media now, athletes are already playing in front of hundreds and thousands of fans. And now everything is also published online for millions to see, millions to critique and give opinions on. And I know I don't like apologizing when I'm angry. I would imagine. It's actually really, really hard. So how has the increased like accountability and, someone who has the worst day of their life and acts impulsively and aggressively, having that blasted, how does that affect their relationship with anger if now they feel shame, but it's really hard to apologize?
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because when I say I don't like to apologize, people think that I'm like this self-centered prick. No. When I'm wrong, I apologize. That doesn't mean that I like it. It's not a fun experience announcing out loud, yeah, that not my best work, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and I'm so glad that you said that, because I think that people, well, here, this is the reason why, right? So let's say you punch me in the nose, right? My nose hurts. What does society expect you to do afterwards?
Apologize. I'm sorry I hurt your nose.
Right? And what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to accept your apology, but my nose still hurts. Sometimes apologizing is the shittiest thing you could actually do. Because once you apologize, now it puts on the other person the pressure that they're supposed to accept it. But I'm still hurt. I'm not ready to accept it. And I think that forgiveness is a gift that does not have to be given until you're ready to give it. So there's also something to be said for when you talk about accountability in athletes and social media. Sometimes it doesn't matter if they apologize, because if they apologize, people are going to go, well, obviously their agent and their PR people told them, all right, you just did something stupid. You need to apologize and undo it. So we're going to say that the apology is useless. Right. One of the problems with anger is most people don't know where the red line is until they've already passed it. Especially people that like to be provocative. Like, look, if you're a stand-up comic, your whole career is about pushing the line, right? But if you're a basketball player or a hockey player, if you're an athlete, you got to be real careful. You know, it's not stay in your lane. It's be mindful. You know, I used to wonder why a coach like Bobby Knight would be seen as a good coach when he had all of his athletes afraid of him. And what I came to appreciate was, well, he was an excellent motivator, and he modernized and evolved the motion offense. So he was a technical genius. But the thing is that I would argue the reason why he didn't have a lot of pros is because when people are playing afraid, they don't have the courage to be creative. And creativity is where you do shit that everyone else goes, that's not even possible. And then you go, yeah, if you watch me. And so I think fear and creativity have a strange relationship, and the top athletes are the ones that are able to be creative and do things that most people think are not possible. And then when they're creative and they do things, they start going, oh, I could push the limits everywhere. No, you can't. No, you can't. And sometimes they put their foot in their mouth. They'll say something that, and sometimes, listen, that's the other thing. You know, you're entitled to have a shitty day. Everybody has a shitty day, right? So, but you're a professional athlete. Now we're going to throw microphones in your face and get every soundbite we possibly can. And by the way, once it's in the Ethernet, it's there forever. You know, the high school quarterback who makes throws around a racial epithet or something related to homosexualities, and does this, he's like a sophomore or a junior, right? Stupid. But now this is affecting whether or not he gets a scholarship in college. They'll somehow find that when they're doing their draft reviews on them, right? I don't know anyone, myself included, that if my worst moments were up on the screen, I would feel comfortable with the world seeing them all the time. People do not realize how hard it is for an athlete to be in the public eye. And it doesn't mean if someone says something that's racist that you just excuse it. I'm not saying, oh, no big deal. We all think that way. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that a lot of people do things that are less than ideal, especially when they're young and they're figuring out who they are and they're trying to be part of a group of people and they're on a team where everybody's talking like this. And now this is going to carry with you your worst moment, your worst day. We ask a lot of maturity for athletes. And I'm not just talking about how they comport themselves on the field. It's real difficult. And that's not even just about anger. That has to do with immaturity. For men, if we're mature by the time we're 40, we're lucky, right? So I think that it's an interesting, if not treacherous, path that we should be mindful of, that athletes are held to a higher standard. And now some people might say that's not fair. It's also not necessarily fair that you're going to college getting, you know, whatever it is, $80,000, $100,000 a year of education, and you don't even plan on using your education. So there's enough unfairness to go around, right?
Right.
I think that NIL creates an opportunity to try to level the playing field a little bit, because boosters have always been giving athletes money. NIL is simply the
Always.
formalization of a process that was already in place. The same way as legalized gambling is the formalization of a process that's in place. So we just need to try to evolve as we're going. And I don't think people always consider the developmental maturity of the athletes that are involved, especially if they have any issues with anger management. You become a target and people are going to provoke you. You're in a bar, you're talking to someone that you just met, and they're going to get under your skin and you're going to punch them in the face and they're going to sue you for millions.
Yeah.
Athletes, it's actually one of the things that I talked about in my first book, Anger Management in Sport. I talked about entourage training, which was all about trying to get people around you trained to keep your ass out of trouble, because people are going to try to provoke you, and you're not in the best position to do that, to prevent that. But that has to do with anger management. It has to do with knowing how to navigate difficult situations, gang identification, where you go, where you don't go. I think athletes need to be very honest that they have a bullseye on their back. Same thing with sexuality. You have athletes that'll say, oh, well, I have all these women throwing themselves at me. Well, maybe, or maybe you just think that everyone's going to give you what you want because you're used to it. So we have to teach you something about consent and legality and drugs and alcohol and all the rest of that. So there's so much that we could be covering. It's funny, when you first were talking earlier about anger in sports, it's so hard to keep this ball of yarn here, because there's all of these different strings that can be pulled. And I hate to say it, but 25 years later, 30 years later, there's not a whole lot that's been done in the field about anger. Trauma is still in its infancy, and certainly violence in sport. So I'm thankful, very grateful for the opportunity to talk with you about these types of topics, because I think that they're all over the place. And half the time I'm talking, you're nodding. You're like, yeah, because I'm not saying anything that's rocket science. Everybody knows it, but no one wants to talk about it.
I really appreciate you talking about all these things. And the more you talk about it, I realize it is not an individual's fight. There's not just angry people that manifest out of nowhere, and that's their personal burden that they have to carry and they have to unlearn by themselves. But even if it is progressing slowly, we're all part of it. The entourage, the environments, how does culture, whether it's within the sport, within the team, within the family, how does the culture teach them about anger and how to use that?
Absolutely. Just think of it statistically, Madeline. I mean, you get 100 sports psychologists in a room. How many of them are going to be assholes? Don't give me a number. My point is just that in any group, you're going to have some people that have personality issues that are problematic. To think that we won't have that with athletes statistically is just ridiculous. The difference, though, is that if you're athletically talented enough, people will tolerate all kinds of shit that you do. And that's why I often say to agents, listen, you want to make your money off of that athlete, you have a responsibility to make sure that they don't go too far outside the lines, because that's going to hurt their bottom line.
The people that bring on the athletes can't just expect them to find their way, but help mold them when you're talking about like agents and coaches. Yeah. Before I forget, we do listeners and fans can mail in questions that they have about certain topics. And so we actually had one today about anger. So I was hoping to play that for you.
Excellent.
Hey, Madeline and Dr. Abrams. I had a question about the origin of anger. What spark first lit the fire or, keeps fire burning. I read somewhere online that scientists had discovered that Jets fandom was considered the origin of anger. That is, people who cheer for the New York Jets are perpetually and justifiably angry. Is that true? Asking for a friend.
Very nice.
How do you feel?
I feel? I would argue that if you're a Jet fan, for all of you listening, you have the ability to embrace resilience and optimism when there's no logical reason for it. So I have in different presentations at different times, however, said when people say, where does anger come from? I sometimes joke that it comes from Brooklyn. It does not come from Brooklyn. We're just much more comfortable talking about it. The simple scientific answer, if we want to not be sarcastic about it, it's hardwired. Positive psychology tried coming along and saying, well, there's positive emotions and there's negative emotions, and that's just bullshit. All emotions are good. The question is, how much is going to help us for the task at hand? And anger got slandered and turned into a bad emotion. Of course, we could joke about where it comes from, and we make all these jokes about somehow it's the lowest class people who deal with this. No, all of us deal with anger issues. And I think the ones that do best are the ones that own it. I have increasingly over the course of my career joked at my own expense, not taking myself too seriously. But as soon as we can own the fact that this is completely normal and expected, then we could start to do something about it. I mean, look, we already have the fuck you watch me people. We already have a lot of people who are using it. Let's just talk about it and formalize it, whether it's for Jet fans or Hoosier fans or wherever people might be struggling with frustration. I mean, look, once you win, it's very hard to repeat. And that sometimes brings sadness and frustration too. Just saying.
So I was looking a little into the Jets because I'm from Green Bay, so I know that you had inherited Aaron Rodgers, and so looking at all the Jets history and kind of where it came from and the anger, how it can be, you talked about kind of weaponized for people that are in lower, you talk about Brooklyn or like lower SES areas, it can be like weaponized in certain ways, but we're all fucking angry.
Right.
We're all angry.
I mean, it's funny. You talk about Aaron Rodgers. He's a different type of dude, right? He marches to the beat of his own drummer. At least what was depicted on the show. If I'm talking about an athlete here, it means I did not work with him. If I work with someone, you'll never hear me say boo about him. To this day, no one knows who I work with. But one of the things that really impressed me about him is that he is his own thinker. And that is rare in team sports. It's rare to have your own way of looking at things that is not significantly influenced. I mean, he came to the Jets and really thought he was going to be a savior. And he completely believed it, and then blew out his Achilles tendon and off we go. But there's something to be said for leaders versus followers. And if you're a follower, that's not the end of the world, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, volleyball. Every person has their own role. Do your job. And some people will lead by example. Some people will lead by being a rah-rah person. I mean, I think everybody has had the experience if they've played sports long enough. There are certain people on the team that are not as talented, but they represent the glue of the team. They have a social intelligence that helps bring everyone together. And watching Aaron Rodgers, I could see how he could go in either direction. He'd either be really polarizing or everyone's get on board. But it also helps when you have that type of arm talent. If you have no arm talent and you think that the world revolves around you, you're dead in the water. But if you're that talented, now it's not you think the world revolves around you. You think I have my own way of viewing things, and if you're interested, come along. And the people come along. A lot of people that have played with Aaron Rodgers have said it's been a great experience for him. Unfortunately, not as successful for the Jets as we would have liked.
Yeah. Something that I like how you talked about was that peak performance and leadership looks different for everyone. So if we talk about bringing it back to like anger and peak performance, dominance, running through a wall, that kind of stuff. But leadership can also be the quiet confidence, quiet dominance, the person that isn't the one screaming in your face in the locker room, but they're the one checking in and making sure everyone's still talking to each other, connected, and leading by example.
I love what you're saying because it's not role and task necessarily. I mean, you need both of those. You need a rah-rah person on your team. You need to, because it's hard to sustain confidence. You need someone who keeps you loose, right? But if you said you have a choice, a rah-rah person or a quiet, confident person, I'm taking option 2 every time. Because that option 2 that's how they carry themselves play to play. But they don't have a problem being aggressive. I mean, look, in 2026, it's real hard for anybody to argue about Tom Brady being the best quarterback of all time, the GOAT. But I'm old enough to remember Joe Montana play. And Joe Montana was on the 49ers. He finished his career on the Chiefs. And you want to talk about a cool customer. He was, where Tom Brady was, you would be yelling at the defensive line. And I am not saying Tom Brady is not amazing, but if you needed one game, one drive, as far as I'm concerned, Joe Montana was the best ever because he was completely cool, completely confident. And everybody that was there playing with him was like, no problem, just follow Joe. In fact, there's an old story of in Super Bowl in the winning drive, he noticed John Candy, an actor, was in the stands. And he really in the huddle said to everyone, isn't that cool? John Candy's there. It just loosened everything. And it's interesting because you need a certain amount of intensity to be successful. But intensity can also get out of control. And you want the person that's in control and can step on their throats when it's time to.
Aroused enough to take charge, but not too overly aroused, so you're like second guessing yourself or acting impulsively, and then you think, oh shit, I didn't think that through.
You could argue the coolest thing about Tom Brady is that you could see when he was really angry, and he didn't have problems still playing at a high level. Tom Brady had spit flying everywhere. Tom Brady absolutely played angry and continued to play at a very high level angry. So what I often say to people is everybody has a cliff. Different people have their cliff further on. And I think that one of the reasons why I work in this space is I also can work at higher levels of anger compared to the average person. It doesn't mean that I don't have a cliff I fall off of. But Tom Brady, I don't remember seeing it. He got better as he got angrier, which is the rare exception in sports.
You've talked about a lot of things, recognizing arousal, the triggers for it, knowing when you're approaching the cliff, how to get yourself back off of it. And so one of the last things I'll ask to get into today is tools athletes can use to adjust their flame. After reading your book, something that I really loved that you talked about was the role music plays.
Yeah.
Because before games, there's warm-ups. You're listening to music. Before warm-ups, you're in the locker room. Before the locker room, you're listening to music on the drive over. And after the game, you are also what you consume. If there's an athlete where their sport demands that aggressiveness, how do you wind down the flame and change the mood on the way home so you don't show up at your house still in that same mindset?
Well, let's take post-game stuff and put that aside for a second because there's too much variability. There are some people that immediately go into analysis mode. They want to go see the film. There are other people that are like, I will deal with this tomorrow. Where this was good. And if you're good, you want to bask. If it was bad, you want to sulk. They need, 12 hours. So there's too much variability. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be so amped up that you're taking it out on other people. But I think that the most important thing to consider with regards to toolboxes is two things. Number one, assess what you already have, right? Everybody already has tools. The question is, how well they're working for them. I was working with a point guard and I taught him breathing exercises and his free throw shooting went down. Why? Because it interfered with the routine he already had. Right? So the first thing you want to do is take a look at what's already there and also take a look at what works well in what circumstances. For example, one of the cool things about music is you cannot reliably predict what's going to be on someone's playlist. I've worked with athletes that would listen to even classical music before games because they wanted to calm before the storm. Certainly people listen to very heavy metal, gangster rap, and all the rest of that stuff, and it helps amp them up. Of course, those people are sometimes at risk for peaking too early. And so any sports psychologist working with athletes needs to know never impose on the athlete what they should be listening to when. Because it has meaning. Like the personal meaning of the music matters actually more than just the physiology of it. However, we do know that usually deeper bass and more beats per second tends to be activating. Softer, rounder sounds like nature sounds. There's a reason you can't buy a clock radio anymore without ocean waves playing in the background. Why? Because it is so soothing. So music is tremendously effective at adjusting people's moods. However, while yes, in baseball you may be able to select your walk-up music, you don't suddenly summon music in an arena when you're in the middle of, the hitting line before you're about to have a volleyball match, right? So that has to do with both pre and post competition. But what I want people to be able to do is I want them to be able to have a full tool set that they practice so that they're available when they need them. So whether it's diaphragmatic breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, which is a system by which you go muscle group by muscle group, contract them and hold them for a bit, because then it relaxes quicker and more intensely. And what you come to realize is that almost everybody has one or two muscle groups that their tension tends to sit. And if you relax that muscle group, your whole body will start to relax. Like for me, it's my traps. And if I'm having a bad day, I'll be sitting in front of the computer and my ears, I'll be up like this. And I can roll my shoulders back, get the PMR engaged and relax. But guess what? It takes reps. Distraction techniques. Obviously, you can't start journaling in the middle. You can't just take a walk. But you want to have the ability to adjust very quickly, cognitive reprocessing, problem solving. What is it that I'm trying to achieve here? You want to be a well-honed machine so that when you're in competition, you don't have to start reaching. It's like, the mechanic doesn't start fiddling around in the toolbox looking for the wrench. They just know there's the wrench. And increasingly, because we have a lot of sports psych folks in the field, you see a lot of athletes on the sidelines using imagery and visualization, LeBron James deep breathing with his eyes closed. And so this is becoming more common. And many of those skills are just as helpful for anger as they are for everything else. However, because we don't learn to identify anger, we don't know what to look for. So at the end of the day, fill your toolbox with everything that we discussed. But the key is early detection.
Anger seems like a skill like any other. It's something you can use to your benefit. And like you said, it takes reps. Practicing it in life, in practice, in games, but before it's crisis time.
Well, Madeline, when I do imagery and visualization exercises, most sports psychologists use imagery and visualization for two primary things. One is relaxation. Two is to be able to visualize elite performance, because if you could see it, you could do it, right? Well, take it one step further. I deliberately provoke people and try to piss them off in imagery exercises so that they could learn to get themselves amped up and adjust the flame down before they need it. Okay,
so you help facilitate that so when it does come, it's not the first time.
Absolutely. We've been aware of this for a long time. Shit's going to happen, right? And we should be prepared for it. As they say, man plans and God laughs. I mean, it's gone a long time now, but Ken Ravizza used to talk about this all the time with athletes. Shit's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's not up for debate. The question is whether or not you're going to be the person that's learned to expect the unexpected and roll with it, or you're going to go, oh, crap, I've never seen this before. I don't know what to do. Better to be the first guy. Right.
Thank you so much for sharing your time, your knowledge. We really appreciate it. Some things that I'm taking away from today is that we're all fucking angry, and it's better to use it and mobilize it instead of ignoring it and letting it suppress us. So thank you so much, Mitch. Thanks for joining us at United, and thank you everyone for listening today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Madeline.
Time 44-41, and a touchdown wins it. Snap back to Hilinski, drops back, has time, passes left, caught, made at the catchment to the 20-yard line, Morrow to the 10, runs for the win, dives for the pylon. Touchdown, Washington State. He's celebrating like it was